Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Ben. I'm 25 years old from Melbourne, Australia, and I've had Crohn's disease for 7 years now. The point of this video is to essentially recap the last 7 years of having Crohn's. I sort of want to provide some encouragement and let this video maybe be a reminder to everyone watching that there is a life beyond getting Crohn's. Currently, my life's pretty great. I don't have any symptoms. I'm basically in remission and I'm very optimistic about the future. But equally, I understand how hard it can be in those first few months and even first few years. So hopefully this video helps you out and potentially eases your mind if you are going through a pretty tough time at the moment. Of course, none of this is medical advice. I'm just sharing my own experience and some tips around general well-being and health. But if you do find this video useful or there is something you'd like to know, then definitely drop a comment down below or feel free to message me on Instagram. I'll have that link in the description. So starting off, as I said, I'm 25 years old. I first got diagnosed at 17. It was a particularly busy part of my life. It's my final year of high school, so already it was a very stressful and intense time. But of course, Crohn's does not discriminate. You can get it very young, you can get it, in your 20s and then later in life as well. For me, it just happened when I was, basically a teenager. So I had to deal with it head on. In a way, it was actually quite a good time because I felt like, in a sense, I was quite naive about health, and it sort of it kickstarted my journey into overall self-improvement and having a better, more healthy approach to what I put into my body. So over the last 7 years, I've been on a number of drugs, including steroids or prednisolone. I've been on Imurin, or Azathioprine as it's known as, and I've also been on Stelara injections, which I'm taking currently. I've made individual videos on most of these drugs, so if you're looking for a more detailed approach, then definitely check them out, but I will quickly just touch on them now. So when I was first diagnosed, the symptoms I had initially actually were rapid weight loss, lots of diarrhea, I had some blood in my stools, and Crohn's does run in my family, so it was pretty easy for me to kind of assume that I probably had Crohn's. So essentially went to the GP, they referred me to a specialist, did a colonoscopy, some blood tests, and came back with Crohn's. So essentially, firstly, they put me on steroids and Pentasa that curbed the inflammation pretty quickly. So after a year, I kind of transitioned off the steroids, had a flare-up, was put back on them again, and this kind of yo-yo effect lasted maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I was then put on to Imurin for around another 2 years. That involved constant blood tests to make sure my liver count was all in check. Imurin, or azathioprine, does have some scary side effects. For me, I had nothing major, nor was I ever kind of worried about some of those side effects happening to me. The only side effect I had was this giant butterfly rash across my face, which wasn't ideal. It definitely affected my self-esteem and my overall confidence. But once I expressed that to my doctor, we were able to kind of taper the dose and transition to Stelara, which is the medication I'm on currently and have been on for at least 2 years as well. So Stelara has been great for me. It's just 2 injections every 8 weeks. I do it from my home, it takes 5 minutes, and it's so much easier than taking multiple tablets per day. I've had no side effects, and overall it's made travel way easier in a sense. Short-term travel, way better. I'm not taking any medication with me. Any travel that's longer than say 2 months, I have to bring a cooler bag and the needles, and it can be quite annoying. I have talked about that more in my Stelara video, so I won't touch on that anymore. But Stelara injections for the time being, I love it, it's great, it's working wonders for me, and hopefully I can stay on that for a while. So daily life with Crohn's, I think when you're first diagnosed, you essentially have to change your lifestyle habits and the food and the drinks you consume. So firstly for me, diet was a huge thing I had to change pretty radically and pretty quickly. Growing up, I always had a pretty healthy diet. I definitely liked junk foods, sugary foods, stuff like that. Not overly so, but I was definitely just a kid that loved chocolate and lollies and all that stuff. But when I was diagnosed, I had to essentially cut out all that and eat pretty clean. Now that I'm a bit older, I think it's very important to have a very healthy diet, whether you have Crohn's or not. Try and eat as organic as possible. But I know it's not always possible. It's so expensive depending on where you live. And honestly, I can't justify eating that way all the time. But if you can do it every now and then, I think it's definitely worth it. Cut out all the processed foods. Alcohol, I still drink pretty often. Not as bad as I used to. I definitely don't binge drink as much as I used to, which is great. But still, I still enjoy it. So that's one thing that I had to kind of navigate. When I was 17, 18, I was obviously drinking quite frequently, and it was almost, I guess, the first time I was drinking, but equally having Crohn's made that very, very complicated. You know, I'd be out with my friends, they'd be drinking, and then I was kind of playing it safe and they wouldn't understand, and it was a complicated battle. So I do understand if you are in that age bracket, I understand how difficult that is. But just know that if you have good friends, they will support you. I think that's the most important thing too, is to communicate what you're going through with the people you trust. Not everyone needs to know by any means, but your close circle, I think it's very important to keep them informed. So in terms of overall study and maybe work, I say this kind of softly, I wouldn't even say recommend. If you trust your employer and you trust your teachers, I think it's a great idea to tell them, especially if you are planning on taking extended sick leave or some random days here and there. It's better that they know what you're going through. That way you can, maybe not so much sympathy, but they kind of give you a bit more leniency around certain things like deadlines and stuff like that. And overall, if you don't have any energy or you're failing to contribute to projects, I think this might be a good thing to do, so everyone kind of is on the same page as you and you don't have to feel guilty or kind of stressed out about your condition impacting the rest of your life. So in terms of overall diet tips, obviously none of this is a medical advice or nutritional advice, it's just my own personal lived experience. I follow a gluten-free and dairy-free diet most of the time. I used to be far more strict and it was definitely beneficial. I even feel a difference these days. I'm not as good with it, and I still feel when I have like a pizza or some ice cream, obviously they're kind of processed foods, I understand that. But even just normal toast, I definitely feel it in my stomach. It almost feels like my stomach is heating up more. There's just more work being done to process those foods. But essentially, when I cut out those foods, my Crohn's improved dramatically. Like, it was actually insane how quickly that worked and how much better I felt. So I guess that if you are looking for potentially alternatives or things outside of your medication, I would definitely look towards overall diet. So just quickly going to recap that, no processed foods, no junk foods, limit your alcohol or avoid it completely, and potentially try gluten-free or dairy-free diet to see if it works. So I just want to kind of give some tips or maybe some encouragement if you're just being diagnosed. I definitely understand how traumatic and maybe depressing it can be when you're first diagnosed with Crohn's. Your whole world kind of flips upside down and you don't really know where to look, how your life's going to be in the short term, but equally the long term, and it can be quite an overwhelming time. But I just want to say that 7 years in, I almost feel like I've forgotten about having this disease, if that makes sense. Like, of course, I do my medication every 2 months, and I am conscious of my diet. But with that said, it's not a burden on my life anymore. I really forget about it, which is great. And I think that's a position that hopefully most of us can achieve. It might not be within 7 years, it could be 10, 15 years. But I think overall that is something we can all look towards. But of course, that does depend on the medications you're on and your overall journey with Crohn's. For me, I've been so lucky. I've never had surgery. I've never had any hospitalizations. So I'm potentially in a different category to lots of other people. But yeah, I just want to put it out there to say that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And even though the beginning really, really sucks, I totally understand. You think that it's never going to end, it's going to be this way forever. I can promise you it's not the case. And I like to think that I've proved that to myself. I feel great about life now. I'm very optimistic for the future and overall health. And I also think that getting Crohn's almost transformed the way I think about things in terms of diet, energy, and overall health in general. I see a lot of people out there who don't have Crohn's, the way they live their lives, the choices they make. It's not for me to judge, obviously, but I'm almost glad that I was forced to really look within myself on how I can essentially treat myself and work on things better. So how do I feel about the future of Crohn's disease? I think that more and more people are getting it and being diagnosed. And I can even see that with the videos I've put out in the past. I think initially when I was putting them out, they weren't getting very many views. But it seems like lately they've not been taken off, but there's definitely more of a discussion around it. Which in one sense, obviously it's awful, more people having this disease, but equally it's very fascinating to see people talk about it. I think maybe 10, 15 years ago and beyond that, no one really discussed it. So the fact that people are willing to be a bit vulnerable and share their thoughts and opinions, I think it's a great thing. Obviously, more research is being done on the disease and the drugs out there, which I think is a great thing. And hopefully there will be a cure someday. I have done no research on when that will be. I have some blind faith that there will be one, so we'll see what happens. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. It definitely was a little bit vague on certain areas. I've gone more into depth on past videos, so maybe they might be a bit more suitable if you want to know something specific. But equally, if there's something you just quickly want to know, feel free to drop a comment or once again message me on Instagram. I'm not the most responsive, but I'll do my best. But I'm sure if you drop a comment, someone else will probably jump in. I've seen a lot of great discussions on my past videos, which honestly is amazing to see. So yeah, I'd love to see that continue. And as always, thanks for watching. I wish you all the best. And just remember that although it's really, really bad at the moment, if you're going through that initial period, I can promise you it does get better. So don't let it get you down and always look forward to the future. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one, and yeah, cheers.